Dust curled up in slow spirals behind the lone rider as the sun dropped low on the horizon, bleeding orange across the wide, empty plains. His horse moved steady, hooves sinking into the dry earth with each step. He'd been riding for hours, 40 miles or more, and there was a weight in his chest heavier than the iron revolver at his hip. The man's name was Coulter Hayes, a drifter by look but with a quiet purpose in his eyes. Folks who crossed his path usually stepped aside. There was something about the way he carried himself, like a man who'd seen too much but still had one last job to do. Ahead, the land stretched out bare except for a lone cottonwood tree, its branches twisted like old bones. Beyond it, a small homestead sat in the distance, nothing more than a weathered cabin, a paddock for a few scrawny cattle, and a barn whose roof sagged in the middle. Coulter slowed his horse as he neared the tree, his hand brushing the worn handle of his Colt. He had come here for a reason, and the name of the man he intended to kill sat on his tongue like bitter whiskey. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter. High, soft, unguarded. A child's laughter. He pulled the reins, halting the horse. There, just past the fence line, a girl stood barefoot in the dust, a small bucket in her hand. She couldn't have been more than 10. Her hair was sun-bleached and tangled, her dress a simple calico faded from too many washes. She looked up at him with wide, unafraid eyes, the kind that didn't yet know what men like him were capable of. Coulter felt something twist inside him. He'd ridden 40 miles with one thought in his head: kill the man who'd taken everything from him. But as the girl tilted her head, studying him with a strange mix of curiosity and trust, Coulter's fingers eased off the gun. He swung a leg over and stepped down slowly, boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. "Evenin'," he said, his voice rough from the road. The girl blinked, then gave a shy nod. "You're not from around here." "No," he replied. She studied him another moment before saying, "You look tired." Coulter exhaled, a low, humorless sound. "I am." The girl smiled faintly, as if that was answer enough, then lifted her bucket. "Mama says strangers get water if they're thirsty. You can come to the well if you want." He glanced toward the cabin. Smoke curled from the chimney. Somewhere inside, he knew, was the man he'd come to kill, her father. But looking back at her, something in him shifted. Not yet, he thought. Hours earlier, that same morning, Coulter had been in a saloon 30 miles south, sitting in the far corner with a glass of rotgut whiskey untouched before him. Folks gave him space. They always did. His hands were scarred, his face weathered by years of sun and violence, and his eyes, pale, cold, told a story no one dared to ask about. A ranch hand came in, laughing too loud, talking too much. "Saw Nathan Barlow yesterday," the man bragged, slapping the counter. "Got himself a new herd, a new place, new wife too. Lucky bastard, livin' like a king after what he did to folks up north. Guess no one remembers anymore." But Coulter remembered. He remembered the night Barlow had burned his brother's home to the ground, taking the cattle, leaving nothing but smoke and death in his wake. Coulter had waited a long time for this. Now, standing by the well, the girl cranked the handle with both hands, the rope creaking as the bucket rose. She was small but determined, her face set in quiet concentration. "What's your name?" she asked as she worked. "Coulter. I'm Elsie." He nodded, watching her hands as she strained to pull the bucket over the lip. "You live far?" she asked. "Far enough." Elsie poured water into a tin cup, holding it out with both hands. "You can sit on the porch if you're tired. Mama don't like folks standin' around in the yard." He took the cup, the cool metal biting against his palm. For the first time all day, he drank. From inside the cabin came the sound of boots on wood, heavy and familiar. The door creaked open. A man stepped out, broad-shouldered, bearded, with a rifle slung casually in one hand. His face was weathered but sharp, eyes the color of cold steel. Coulter felt the old rage rise in him, hot and choking. Nathan Barlow. The man didn't recognize him, not yet. He only gave a short nod. "Evenin'. Can I help you?" Coulter said nothing, setting the cup down on the well's edge. His hand drifted near his hip. Then Elsie spoke, her voice light and unknowing. "Papa, this is Mr. Coulter. He was thirsty, so I gave him water." Barlow's expression softened at his daughter's words. He rested a hand on her head. "Good girl." Coulter's jaw clenched. His fingers hovered near the Colt's grip. He'd pictured this moment 1,000 times. Quick, clean, like justice long overdue. But standing there, with Elsie's bright eyes looking between them, the weight of what he'd come to do felt different. The evening wind picked up, stirring the dust at their feet. Coulter's hand dropped away from the gun. He forced himself to breathe, his voice low when he finally spoke. "Don't mean to trouble you," he said. "Just passin' through." Barlow studied him a moment longer, suspicion flickering across his face, but he only nodded. "There's a spare stall in the barn if your horse needs rest. Night gets cold out here." Coulter gave the faintest nod, then turned toward the barn. Each step felt heavier than the last, because he knew this wasn't over. Not yet, but something in his chest told him, for the first time in years, this wouldn't be as simple as pulling a trigger. The barn smelled of dry hay and old timber, a place where the night wind whistled through the cracks in the boards. Coulter stood in the shadows, brushing down his horse with slow, deliberate strokes. His fingers moved by habit, but his mind wasn't on the animal. It was on the man inside that cabin, and the girl who had looked at him as if he were something other than what he was. Every scrape of the brush against the horse's flank sounded loud in the quiet. Outside, a coyote yipped somewhere far off, its call sharp against the deepening dark. He leaned against a beam, staring at the ground. It would be easy, wait until the family slept, walk to the door, and finish what he'd come for. The Colt was oiled, loaded, ready. But Elsie's voice lingered in his head. "You look tired." Not scared, not suspicious, just human. Coulter cursed under his breath, gripping the beam until his knuckles whitened. Later, as he left the barn, a warm glow spilled from the cabin windows. He approached slow, boots crunching softly on the dirt. Through the glass, he could see them. Nathan Barlow sitting at a rough-hewn table, his rifle propped against the wall. Across from him sat a woman, dark hair pulled into a loose braid, her face lined from sun and work. She laughed at something he said, her hand brushing his as she passed him a plate. And there was Elsie, curled on a rug with a ragged doll, humming softly to herself. It was a picture of a life Coulter hadn't seen in years. A simple family, unaware of the blood that tied them to a man's ruin. The door opened. The woman stepped out, holding a small oil lamp. She startled slightly at seeing him there in the dark, but her eyes softened quickly. "You didn't eat," she said. Coulter shifted his weight. "I'm fine." She tilted her head, studying him the way Elsie had earlier. "Road like that, you can't live on dust and air. Come inside." He hesitated. "Just supper," she said, as if sensing his unease. No one out here has the luxury of turning away company. Against his better judgment, Coulter followed her in. Inside, the air was warm with the smell of cornbread and beans. Elsie looked up, beaming. "Papa." Mr. Coulter came in. Nathan's eyes flicked to him, narrowing slightly. The man didn't know him, not yet, but something in Coulter's face was familiar enough to unsettle him. Coulter sat stiffly at the table. Nathan poured coffee into a tin cup, sliding it over. "Long way you've been riding?" "Long enough." Nathan studied him a beat longer before leaning back in his chair. "Not many folks come this far out unless they're running from something." The words hung heavy. Coulter didn't answer. After supper, Elsie tugged at her father's sleeve. "Papa, can I show him the pony?" Nathan glanced at Coulter, then gave a slow nod. "Stay close to the fence." Outside, the night was cold, the stars sharp against the dark sky. Elsie ran ahead, skirts brushing the dirt. "Papa got him for me last spring," she said proudly, stroking the shaggy little pony. Coulter leaned on the fence, watching her. "You don't talk much," Elsie said, glancing up at him. "Never saw much point," he replied. "Mama says silence is heavy. Sometimes you gotta put it down." Coulter blinked at her, This slip of a girl saying words that felt far older than her years. From across the yard, Nathan called, "Elsie." Inside. Bedtime. She gave Coulter a small smile before darting off. Nathan approached slowly, stopping a few feet away. The lamplight from the cabin cast his face in half-shadow. "You got business with me?" Nathan asked, voice low now. Coulter's jaw tightened. "Most men don't ride 40 miles just to eat my wife's beans," Nathan added. Coulter met his eyes. For the first time, Nathan seemed to recognize something, just a flicker. "You're Coulter Hayes," Nathan said, a touch of unease in his voice. Coulter didn't deny it. Nathan's hand drifted slightly toward the rifle slung over his shoulder. But then Elsie's laugh carried faintly from inside the cabin, high and sweet. Nathan's fingers stopped. Coulter felt the weight of the Colt at his side like a brand. He could draw faster than Nathan could shoulder that rifle. He'd done it before, plenty of times. But as silence stretched between them, neither man moved. Finally, Nathan said, "Whatever you came for, don't do it here. Not where she can see." Coulter's chest felt tight. The smart thing, the thing he'd planned for all this time, was to finish it right there. Instead, he stepped back. "I'll be gone by morning," he said. But deep down, he knew leaving wouldn't be that easy. Because the girl's trust, the quiet decency of this family, it was already pulling at something in him that revenge couldn't quiet. And as he turned toward the barn, Nathan called softly after him, voice steady but edged with warning. "Tomorrow we finish what's between us. Away from her." Coulter didn't answer, but he knew Nathan was right. One way or another, this wasn't over. The night stretched long and restless. Coulter lay in the barn loft, staring through the gaps in the boards at a sliver of moonlight cutting across the dirt floor. His revolver sat beside him, fully loaded, as it always did. But tonight, he hadn't touched it once. Every time his eyes drifted shut, he saw Elsie's face, smiling, trusting, untouched by the things men like him and Nathan Barlow had done. By dawn, he had made up his mind to ride out quietly, to leave this land behind before blood spilled on the dirt. But the world had other plans. The first sign of trouble came with the sound of hoofbeats, distant at first, then growing closer. Coulter was already awake, leaning on the loft rail when he heard them. At least half a dozen riders, moving fast. He stepped down the ladder, boots hitting the ground soft and steady. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the pale light was enough to make out the shapes cresting the ridge. 6 men, rifles slung across their saddles. Coulter didn't need an introduction to know what they were. Bounty hunters. Nathan stepped out of the cabin, rifle already in his hands. His wife appeared in the doorway, clutching Elsie's shoulders, pulling her back. The lead rider slowed, lifting a hand. "Nathan Barlow." His voice carried sharp in the morning stillness. "You know why we're here." Coulter stayed near the barn, watching. Nathan's jaw tightened. "I paid you what I owed." The man spat in the dirt. "Not enough. Judge wants to see you hang. Says you left a trail of bodies up north." Coulter's chest tightened. It wasn't just about him anymore. Nathan had made more enemies than Coulter knew. The rider's gaze flicked past Nathan, settling on Coulter. "Well, hell," the man said, smirking. "Ain't this a lucky morning? Coulter Hayes, there's a price on you too." Coulter didn't flinch. 2 for 1, the man chuckled. "Reckon we'll be rich before sundown." Nathan shifted slightly, his voice low enough for only Coulter to hear. "They'll kill us both, and they'll take her." Coulter's hand hovered near his Colt. This wasn't how he'd pictured it. Dying side by side with the man he'd ridden 40 miles to kill. But when he looked at Elsie, clinging to her mother's skirts, her eyes wide and terrified, the choice came as easy as breathing. The standoff stretched. The morning wind kicked up dust, curling around their boots. The lead rider grinned, raising his rifle just an inch. Nathan muttered, "We can take 2, maybe 3 before they cut us down." Coulter's voice was steady. "Then we make the first shots count." The man in the saddle opened his mouth to speak, but the sharp crack of a gunshot split the air. One of the riders jerked sideways, falling from his horse with a heavy thud. Chaos erupted. The hunters wheeled their mounts, shouting, fumbling for rifles. Nathan dropped to a knee, firing again. Coulter drew his Colt in a blur, the sound of each shot echoing off the dry earth. The air filled with smoke, horses screaming, boots pounding. But in the middle of it all, Coulter never looked toward Nathan. He looked toward the cabin, where Elsie crouched in the doorway, her tiny hands pressed to her ears. Every bullet he fired was for her. 2 men fell. The rest spurred their horses hard, retreating over the ridge, their curses fading on the wind. Silence followed, broken only by the ragged breathing of men who'd just seen death up close. Coulter reloaded slow, methodical, every motion practiced. Nathan stood, lowering his rifle. He met Coulter's gaze, and for the first time there wasn't hate between them. "You could have let them take me," Nathan said. Coulter holstered his Colt. "Thought about it." Nathan gave a dry, humorless laugh. Elsie ran out then, barreling into her father's legs. He knelt, gathering her close, his big hands trembling against her back. When Nathan looked up again, his eyes weren't as hard as before. "You and me," he said. "We finish this tomorrow, away from here. But today," he glanced toward the ridge where the hunters had vanished. "Today we're alive because of you." Coulter didn't answer, because deep down he already knew tomorrow might never come. Not the way either of them expected. The day passed heavy with silence. Nathan spent it mending a broken fence post, his movements slow, deliberate, as though he needed the work to keep from thinking. His wife cooked in the cabin, glancing toward the barn more often than usual. Coulter stayed apart, sitting in the shade of the cottonwood with his horse tethered nearby. He cleaned his Colt carefully, running the cloth along the barrel as if polishing away more than just dust and gunpowder. Elsie wandered out after a while, a scrap of fabric clutched in her small hands. "Mama says you're leaving," she said, sitting cross-legged in the dirt before him. Coulter looked at her, then at the cloth she was twisting nervously. "That's so?" She nodded. "She says sometimes men don't stay long. Says it's not always their fault." He didn't know what to say to that. Elsie held the scrap out. It was just a piece of faded calico, the edge roughly stitched with uneven thread. "It's for you," she said. "I wanted to make it a handkerchief, but I'm not good at it yet." Coulter stared at it, the stitches clumsy but earnest. Slowly he reached out and took it. "Thank you," he said, his voice rougher than he meant. She smiled. "Papa says you're dangerous, but you don't feel dangerous." He looked away. "Your papa's right. You didn't shoot him," Elsie said simply. "So maybe you're not what he thinks." Later, near sundown, Nathan approached. He didn't carry his rifle this time. Instead, he held a tin cup of coffee, setting it down near Coulter. "Never figured you for the type to walk away from a fight," Nathan said. Coulter didn't look up. "Never figured you for the type to have a kid." Nathan let out a short, humorless laugh. "Didn't plan on it. Then Elsie happened. Changes a man. Makes him think about the kind of world he's leaving behind." Coulter finally met his eyes. "I did bad things," Nathan said. "You know it. I know it. The men this morning, they weren't wrong." Coulter's jaw clenched. "I ain't asking for forgiveness," Nathan said quietly. "Just asking if you're willing to be the one to make my little girl an orphan." The wind picked up then, cool and sharp as the sun dipped low. Coulter stared at the horizon, the sky painted in red and gold. "I came here to kill you," he said finally. "I told myself it was justice. Truth is, I just wanted you dead. Wanted to see you gone for what you did to my brother." Nathan nodded slowly. "But she—" Coulter glanced toward the cabin where Elsie's small figure stood framed in the doorway, watching them both. "She don't deserve to grow up knowing her father died in the dirt." Nathan swallowed hard. "Then walk away. Take your horse and ride out. I won't stop you." Coulter studied him. "You think that'll fix it?" "No," Nathan admitted. "But maybe it gives her a chance to believe in better men than us." For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Nathan said, "I'll ride to town tomorrow. Turn myself in." Coulter's eyes flicked to him, surprised. She deserves a father who don't keep looking over his shoulder, Nathan said. If I hang, at least she'll know I tried to make it right. Coulter stared at him for a long moment, then stood. You do that, he said. You give her that. That night, as the family sat down to supper, Nathan gestured toward an empty chair. Eat with us, he said. Coulter hesitated, then sat. The meal passed quiet, with only Elsie's chatter filling the room. She talked about the pony, about wanting to learn to ride fast, about the flowers that bloomed down by the creek in spring. For the first time in years, Coulter felt the tightness in his chest loosen. He found himself listening, not because he cared about flowers or ponies, but because every word reminded him of what life looked like when it wasn't ruled by hate. When the plates were cleared, Elsie climbed onto his lap, unafraid. She placed her tiny hand on his scarred one. You don't have to go tonight, she whispered. Coulter swallowed hard. Maybe I don't. Nathan met his eyes across the table. No words passed between them, just a silent understanding that tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But for tonight, they let it rest. Dawn came soft and pale, washing the plains in muted gold. Coulter saddled his horse without a word, his hands steady but heavy with something that felt too much like loss. Nathan stood nearby, rifle slung across his back, a single canvas bag packed and tied at his feet. Elsie sat on the porch steps, her doll in her lap, her face quiet in a way children shouldn't have to be. You're really going? She asked finally. Nathan crouched, brushing a hand through her hair. I have to, Bug. I've done wrong things, and sometimes a man's gotta pay for what he's done. She clutched his sleeve. But you're my papa. I'll always be your papa, he said softly. Coulter turned away, jaw clenched tight. He'd seen too many partings, but this one carved at him deeper than he expected. Nathan rose, looking at Coulter. You'll see her safe, won't you? Just until my brother comes. He'll take her to his place. Coulter hesitated. I'll see her safe. Nathan nodded, then looked at Elsie one last time. Be good for your mama. And remember what I told you. Don't let the world make you mean. She nodded, her little chin trembling. Nathan mounted his horse, gave a final glance at his family, and turned toward the road. Coulter stood there a long time, watching until Nathan became no more than a figure against the rising sun. The next days blurred together. Coulter stayed, helping mend fences, hauling water, doing the work of a man who wasn't planning to stay but couldn't quite bring himself to leave. Elsie followed him everywhere, asking about his horse, about the far-off places he'd seen, about the brother he never spoke of. One night, as the fire burned low, she asked softly, Will Papa come back? Coulter stared into the flames. Maybe, maybe not. She looked down at her doll, running her fingers over its ragged dress. If he doesn't, will you? The words caught him off guard. He hadn't let himself think that far ahead. Weeks later, word came back from town. Nathan Barlow had stood before the judge, confessed to the things he'd done. Some men in town wanted him hanged. Others, remembering how he'd saved his neighbors from outlaws, spoke for mercy. In the end, they spared his life, but sent him far, locked away behind walls he'd never walk free from again. When Coulter told Elsie, she nodded solemnly. He kept his promise, she said simply, and somehow that was enough for her. The morning Coulter finally rode out, Elsie stood barefoot in the yard, holding out the crooked handkerchief she'd stitched. You still have it? She asked. He nodded, pulling it from his pocket. Always will. She smiled faintly. Then you have to come back. Coulter looked at her for a long moment, then swung into the saddle. I'll come back, he said, voice low but certain. As he rode away, the wind carried the sound of her voice calling after him. A sound small but bright in the vast emptiness of the plains. And for the first time in years, Coulter felt the weight of vengeance slip from his shoulders. Because though he hadn't forgiven Nathan Barlow, he'd found something stronger than revenge. A reason to ride back someday, not as a killer, but as a man who'd finally chosen life over blood. And that was enough.